As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
So The Economist reported Sunday that Ukraine's increasing drone attacks inside Russia are carried out using intelligence gathered by Kiev's Western backers. So this report cited sources close to Ukrainian drone developers and Ukrainian military insiders, including a drone coordinator within Ukraine's military intelligence. The report detailed the planning that goes into the drone attacks, which involves gathering intelligence on Russian air defenses. So I'll read this excerpt from the report. It reads, quote, "Operators launch in the early morning when defenders' concentration might be elapsing and use an order of attack designed to keep air defenses busy. They gather intelligence often from Western partners about radars, electronic warfare, and air defense assets," end quote. So since Ukraine has stepped up its drone attacks inside Russia, and they've increased them pretty significantly just in the past month, so since then, Biden administration officials have insisted that the U.S. does not encourage or enable the operations. But this report contradicts that claim as, if they're getting intelligence from their Western partners, that more than likely means the U.S., as the U.S., is leading this whole proxy war, and they do have the more, sophisticated intelligence, when it comes to satellites and things like that. So this isn't really a surprise, but of course, there's always the concern about these types of attacks escalating. So Israeli airstrikes on Syria targeted the Aleppo airport early Monday morning, knocking it out of service. A military source told Syria's news agency, quote, "At about 4:30 a.m. on Monday, the Israeli enemy carried out an aerial attack of aggression from the direction of the Mediterranean Sea, west of Latakia, targeting Aleppo airport," end quote. So no casualties were reported in the attack, but the source said that it caused material damage to the airport runway, putting it out of service. The strike marks the fifth time since September 2022 that Israeli airstrikes shut down the Aleppo airport, and the fourth time this year. So Aleppo was devastated by the earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria on February 6th, and the city's airport became a vital channel for aid. But that didn't stop the Israeli airstrikes. They put the Aleppo airport out of commission twice in March, and the UN said that cut off aid deliveries, and they did it again in May, and now again. And this is something that Israel really started targeting Syria's airports toward the end of last year. They also hit the Damascus International Airport quite a bit. So this article is from Middle East Eye. And so there was a meeting between Israel's foreign minister and Libya's foreign minister, and the Libyan foreign minister was fired over it. And it's interesting, and apparently the U.S. was behind the meeting because they're pushing for more normalization. So the United States complained to the Israeli government this weekend about Foreign Minister Eli Cohen's decision to publicly reveal a secret meeting with his Libyan counterpart. And this is based on a report from Axios. So Libyan Foreign Minister Najila al-Mangoush met with Israel's Cohen in Italy last week, despite the two countries not having formal relations. Cohen boasted in a statement about the great potential for the two countries to cooperate. So since then, again, Libya's foreign minister was removed, and there's been protests in Libya. They're not happy about it. One U.S. official told Axios that the Biden administration was surprised when Cohen revealed the meeting, saying that Washington's understanding was that it was meant to be kept secret. And this is something that's pretty normal. Israeli officials secretly meeting with Arab countries that they don't have normal relations with. But again, it's making it public that the U.S. is unhappy about. And one thing to point out when we're talking about Libya, this is the U.S. and UN-backed government that they're talking about. I believe it's called the Government of National Accord. And they don't control all of Libya. You have Khalifa Haftar. He's a military general who went back to Libya. He was actually a CIA asset that was living in Virginia for a long time. And after the U.S. took out Gaddafi and in that disastrous intervention, he went back to Libya because I believe he turned on Gaddafi at some point and then fled to the U.S. I forget exactly what his story was, but he was a CIA asset, and he went back, and his army controls a good amount of territory. And then you have, kind of the terrorist groups, and there's been fighting. There was recently a lot of fighting in the capital. It's just been, the country's been locked in war since the, again, disastrous U.S. NATO intervention in 2011. That is responsible for a lot of the terrorist activity in the Sahel region to the south, Niger, which borders Libya, and Burkina Faso and Mali, and all these countries where terrorist attacks have spiked since the Libya intervention that really destabilized the whole region. So according to the New York Times, the Biden administration has been aware since last year that Saudi border guards were slaughtering African migrants on Saudi Arabia's border with Yemen, But the U.S. kept quiet about the killings. So sources told the New York Times that American diplomats were made aware of the news last fall, around the time the U.S. was publicly condemning Riyadh for agreeing to OPEC plus oil production cuts. They had a lot to say about the oil production cuts, but nothing to say about these killings. The administration did not make any public comments about the reported killings, and the administration received more details about the atrocities in December 2022 when the UN presented information about Saudi forces shooting, shelling, and abusing Ethiopian migrants at the border, but the US still kept quiet. So after a Human Rights Watch report was released last week that said Saudi border guards killed hundreds of Ethiopian migrants between March 2022 and June 2023, the Biden administration insisted that it raised concerns with Riyadh about the report, and for their part, the Saudis are denying the allegations. And I should mention the HRW report, Human Rights Watch report, is based on interviews with 38 Ethiopian migrants, but there's other reports and that have said the same thing. The Mixed Migration Center released a report last month that said Saudi border forces killed at least 800 Ethiopian migrants and over 1,700 were injured in 2022.
I would dare say there's intentionality behind this deception. And yes, I think there's the gender ideology agenda to weaken kids, get them to sterilize themselves. I think the whole gender ideology there. Yet with that, I think there is absolutely an agenda by the globalists who want to disempower humanity. Why? Because a disempowered humanity is much easier to control. Try controlling empowered people. Try controlling truly powerful people, let alone try controlling a lot of truly powerful people. Good luck, you ain't going to be able to do it. Why? Because the only way to control someone outside of physical slavery is to get them to be obedient to you, get them to be subservient to you. And that's against our nature. So the only way we're willing to consent to that kind of control is if we're disempowered enough that consenting to the control seems more powerful than where we actually are in our lives. The point is, with this agenda, it's an agenda of getting people to think that there's something that they're not, because that is inherently, exquisitely disempowering. And when you have people consenting to swimming in the pool of disempowerment, they're way easier to control. Oh, I scrolled down further in her account. She reposted this Jordan Peterson tweet, but this caught my eye. 1,100 eminent scientists declare there is no climate emergency. This would be censored. Like, this couldn't appear on YouTube. YouTube has actually deplatformed climatologists, meteorologists for suggesting, man-made climate change it's not that big of a deal, and there is not a climate emergency. So it's absolutely a narrative that requires censorship, because it's weird how things that aren't based in impeccable truth don't have enough strength to withstand like life. So we got to define, what are our values? What do I stand for? One of the things I stand for, I'm sure you do too, or else you wouldn't be watching this, is I stand for freedom. I certainly stand for human rights. I stand for kindness. I stand for protecting the innocent. Know what you stand for. Because it's one thing, like, when the state becomes lawless, corrupt, tyrannical stuff coming at us. Yeah, like, there's a warrior mentality inside of all of us. We're time and place to access it. So we fight against the tyrannical stuff. But we're far more effective if we simultaneously know what we actually stand for. Otherwise, we're just behaving like cancer. We just fight things. But if you're fighting things, you also want to fight for something, which is knowing what you stand for. So, lastly, I would say this. No, maybe not. Two more things. Keep in mind, what I'm rambling about is my advice for the upcoming lockdowns. I will not comply. Know what you stand for. And doing our best to have an acceptance mindset versus an agreement mindset. Acceptance mindset creates unity. Not to sound all airy-fairy and hippie, but we need more unity. Division, we don't need any more of that. Tyrannical people wanting to implement the C40, like no meat, you can fly 3 times a year, buy 3 pieces of clothing. No, you can't fly 3 times a year. That'd be absurd. You can fly once every 3 years. They know divided people are very controllable. United we stand, divided we fall. It's a good saying because it's true. But an agreement-based mindset, which is part of the cancer of society, it just creates more division. It basically says, if we don't agree, then I have to divide against you and I have to reject you. Even freedom lovers fall for this trap. But an acceptance-based mindset, I think it's more from the heart rather than the mind. The acceptance-based mindset says, oh, we might agree, And we might disagree. Either way, I accept you as you are. Oh, you're not vaccinated? I accept you as you are. Oh, you are vaccinated? I accept you as you are, without the need to change you. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to adopt your beliefs, doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to endorse them, but it means I accept you as you are without needing to reject you because we disagree. By the way, if you're only navigating life through an agreement-based mindset, you're going to have a very shitty, shallow life because you'll never meet someone who you agree with 100% all the time on all things. So you might be in proximity to some people for a while, but it'd be a shitty, shallow connection because you're connected via your head's agreement, but the heart offers actual acceptance. By the way, I don't agree with myself. I change my mind about things all the time, so I don't have to reject myself. So with that said, the second to last piece of advice is aim for an acceptance-based mindset, not an agreement-based mindset. By the way, that doesn't mean we roll over and become tolerant of tyrannical shit. Doesn't mean we're complacent with that. I'm talking about relationships with other people. And the last thing I'd say for the upcoming lockdowns, in order for freedom to prevail, human rights to prevail, a way of life with dignity and sovereignty to prevail, the more we allow our words and actions to be in impeccable alignment with our heart, our soul, and our own critical thinking, the stronger we are. So our words and actions, letting those be in alignment with basically who the hell you are, your heart, your soul, and your own critical thinking. The more we can do those, however many things I just listed, the Gandhi Martin Luther King principle, do not comply with unjust laws, do not comply with tyrants. What the hell was the next one? Know what you stand for. Aim for an acceptance-based mindset, not an agreement-based mindset, and then be congruent. Have integrity. Let your words and actions be natural expressions of what's in your heart, your soul, and your own critical thinking.
It's just the sort of thing that is beyond the pale. They descend into the depths of demonic depravity in word and in deed, and it all flows from the dictator and his family, the Aliyev dictatorship of Azerbaijan, and their desires to have total control, not only over the people there, but to get the people there angry at the other, the outsider, which is the Armenians, and so they focus other people on that, on these other people, and have just the kind of mindset that you said, well, there's no way these groups can live together, but they claim, well, yeah, we want reintegration, which is a lie. But it's a very sad thing. And then sadly, Scott, I say shockingly, but this won't shock you because you're very smart about these things and you're knowledgeable. United States government sends subsidy, taxpayers' money over to this dictator in Azerbaijan in violation of Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act. There's that's been waived for a number of years, but now apparently they might enforce it again. And in our local Michigan Republican Congressional District, we actually passed a resolution calling for that. So no more subsidization, no more cooperation and collaboration between the U.S. military and the Azerbaijani military. We shouldn't be doing that. And calling for the lifting of the blockade, the returning of prisoners that they've held that they're abusing in their prisons, they're holding them unlawfully and against agreements. And so we passed that. And then the International Court of Justice came out and issued an opinion, a ruling. And they said to Azerbaijan, you have to leave that corridor open. You must do that. And they've reiterated that, and Azerbaijan refuses to comply. And they say, oh, well, we'll send supplies from this other area, from this town called Agdam. But what they're trying to do with that is then say, okay, now we've got you by control. If you agree to that, now you've agreed you don't have independence. Now you agree we're in control. And they can use that, as a fellow named Paul Bryan, who just wrote a really good article called The Crisis We Ignore, at publication of The Critic, and it's from the United Kingdom. As he pointed out, they could use it. They could poison the people, and that's not beyond the pale in this situation. Something like this happened before, and they've used starvation and blockades before against the Armenian people there. So they're saying, give up everything, and we'll give you what we want to give you from Agdam. But it's a very cynical ploy, a way to trap the people. And after they've done these kidnappings, folks are very, very leery of that. They're just not going to do it. So they're resisting in a Gandhi-like fashion, Scott. They are not fighting violently, though it's their right to defend themselves. But like Gandhi and like the people back in India, they're enduring great hardship to protect their independence and to say we do not consent to rule imposed by this dictator from Baku.
All right. Well, we know how important Azerbaijan is to the American empire. They have that all-important BTC pipeline that runs through there from Azerbaijan through Georgia and into Turkey. And so and really just keeping Caspian oil out of Russian hands as much as possible by staying dominant there. So the Armenians are at a severe disadvantage there. Yeah. I never did understand why after ISIS took Mosul, the Turks didn't just roll right in and say, yeah, thanks for, using ISIS as their shock troops. But it seemed like that was the goal, is to expand the empire right then and there. And possibly Obama told Erdogan no at that, point. But, so speaking of the Islamic State, you mentioned some of these atrocities, and I wondered whether these are Syrian or other Arab veterans of Obama's dirty war in Syria who are now cutting the heads off of. You tell me they're beheading Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh now, in Artsakh?
Right. But those were actually Azerbaijani troops. Who
really?
Yeah, they did it. So
when was that? And in what quantity?
Oh, I'm not sure what the quantity was, but I mean, there were several videos of people being beheaded.
And when was this?
During the 2020 war and right after it. For those people that were, caught behind the lines. And we're talking elderly civilians, Scott. We're not talking about. I mean, if they did it to soldiers, that'd be terrible too. And they did some of that,
Well, that's what Al Qaeda did to Kurds in Syria, for example. So that's what made me wonder whether it was some of these same guys. But no, you're saying this was the Azeri troops actually were the ones doing it, huh?
The Azerbaijani military, and they have a special forces group. I think it's called Yazma or whatever, and they're the ones who did the terrible atrocities to the female soldiers that they captured in 2020, actually in Armenia proper. Mm-hmm. One of the ways they used the jihadist mercenaries, I think in the 2020 war, was basically as cannon fodder. In the early days, things were seemingly going well for the people of Artsakh on the Armenian side. But what the Azerbaijanis and Turks did was they used these jihadist mercenaries to send them in like these large assaults. They sent them out first, and then to see where the defensive positions were that were shooting them. They left their bodies out there to rot, probably for a couple of reasons. And then they would go on from there.
It's the curse of the old world that people are so divided by ethnicity, and you have so many of these conflicts. I don't know what the total number of them is in the world, right now, but a lot of these borders, drawn through violent conflict in the past, especially created by the European empires. I don't know how relevant that is in this particular case, but when you have this weird West Berlin inside East Germany type situation here, we have this piece of Armenia, you say, and I can see to you, I don't know the entire history, but this has been Armenian territory for a very long time. But man, it's surrounded by a foreign nation, and that just leads to such a difficulty here. You have the corridor or you don't. They can turn it on, they can turn it off, all these kinds of things.
It looks like our ambassador to Hungary is up to no good, and certainly not on the side of the many positions that we have. But I'd have to say that I'm sure the way Hungary's being run isn't the way I'd want to see, a libertarian country run. But the whole thing is we're talking about sovereignty and peace and discussion and decency, and the big issue here is by what authority do we have as a powerhouse and owning a empire to go and tell people exactly what to do. This is something I've been complaining as well as you have about. What mischief do we have to over and tell everybody what to do, run their finances, run their military, involved in coups that we are always saying we're way too much involved. But here's somebody that's following those rules, but his views are so bad that it compounds the problem of us interfering in other people's business.
Now, I wrote about this on the Ron Paul Institute website a few months ago because Hungary, similarly to Russia, Hungary has outlawed the aggressive promotion of homosexuality to children. Now, we like to do that in the U.S., right? We have drag queen, story hour, we have all kinds of stuff. Hungary, they say, pass a law, we won't allow this. So what does Biden do? He sends a guy with a husband and 2 kids over there. It's obviously to make a point. It's obviously to rub their noses in it, rub their faces in it. And that's exactly what David Pressman, who is the ambassador, he's not a diplomat, he's just a donor. That's what he's done over there. And he's constantly hectored Hungary. You better do this, you better do that. You need to have more gay pride parades. Every other day you better have one. Screaming at them constantly. And, that's not what diplomacy is about. And everyone wonders, well, why people resent America and Americans around the world? Because that's how these people behave. No one wants to be told how to live. Now, as you pointed out, we may not want to live there. We may not like all of their rules and laws, and that's fine. But the idea that we tell them what to do and hector them constantly it's just not good for relations.
You know, it'd be very important how this works out, because if it looks like they're having the Europeans and Americans are trying to hold Orban back, but if his ideas prevail and more Europeans, you know, that's probably the most important. Where are the Europeans going to go? Are they going to maybe assess things? Maybe we don't need to be so locked into the American position. Who comes over and sends ambassadors like this? Why wouldn't they be doing this to us? From our viewpoint, though, but when we send people over that diplomatically and very, very anxious to help people, our ambassadors go over to enhance our empire. That might be soft, but it's not good either. So the answer is, why don't we just mind our own business? And that would be a much better position, rather than saying that we know exactly the message about how you deal with social issues. And of course, to me, voluntarism is the most important thing, and reject violence.
Recent mask mandates lifted amid pushback. Now, they tried to throw on mask mandates at Kaiser Permanente in Santa Rosa, California. California, of all places, Dr. Paul. And the people said, no way, Jose. We're not going to do it. We're not going to go for it. And they had to say, okay, you got us. We're not going to force you again.
Right. They're on our side, at least on the short run, that why go along with this stuff? You know, they need encouraged, and that's why it's on the side of something good happening, a good idea.
And that's why what we keep saying is because people spoke up. You know, it was on the TV, and here's from the article. They interviewed a couple guys on CBS TV about this. They're trying to put this mandate in Kaiser in Santa Rosa. Actually, we don't need that one yet. We're not there yet. And the guy said, they told us a bunch of expletive. I can guess what that probably was. Richard Stoudinger, a North Sacramento resident, told CBS, I think most people don't believe it now. That's great. And another one, Craig Roberts said, I think it's more political than anything. I just think they're trying to do what they did in 2020. So even the Californians, and I say that as someone who's born and raised there, even the Californians now are catching on that this is nonsense. And also, the second part of it is that Lionsgate Studio, our film studio, they also said, we're going to have mask mandates. And people said, no, we don't want to do it. And so they also canceled it there. Both places.
And it didn't take long, you know, so I would say we were concerned, and rightfully so, but things aren't as bad as they were two and a half years ago. The people are better informed.
They're looking at, I think, the August, because remember the whole thing, Dr. Paul, oh my gosh, COVID's back, put on your mask. Well, this is according to CDC's own numbers. 99% of new COVID-19 deaths reported by CDC are not just due to the virus, according to their own data. It begs the question, well, what was that percentage back when they were getting everyone locked down, you know?
You know, this came up, you know, all during the so-called epidemic, and the fudging of the figures, of the distortion, and all the propaganda to terrorize the people and build up the fear so that people would roll over. But the two words that people tried to point out, there's a big difference between dying of COVID or dying with COVID, especially now that we have found out that there's a lot of question about the testing and you know, exactly what is COVID. Maybe some people with pretty good credentials just argue, you know, it's cold and flu. There will be some, I guess, cellular changes, and it's mysterious for most doctors. You know, most doctors never looked through an electron microscope, you know, and this sort of thing, and trying to figure out these changes. But that's the big issue. And I think that's why this 99%, it was with that tested. I wouldn't even say that it was with COVID. It's with the test that claims that you might have COVID.
True.
Because that's probably closer to the bottom line.
True.